picture yourself right now sitting in front of a blank canvas. You have this incredible vision in your head. Maybe it's a blinding, brilliant sunset, or like you want to paint a highly reflective metallic gold star for the holidays.
It's something that just really needs to shine.
Exactly. You want it to glow. So naturally, you go to your palette, you pick out the absolute brightest, most vibrant yellow or orange you can find, and you just lay it down on the canvas.
Yeah, that's the instinct.
But then you step back, and it doesn't glow at all. It just, it just sits there looking like this flat, dull, almost plasticky orange blob.
It's so frustrating.
It is. You stare at it and think, well, I use bright colors, so why doesn't this look like actual light?
I mean, it is one of the most universally frustrating experiences for anyone trying to capture reality on canvas. And it happens because we are committing a really fundamental perceptual error.
A perceptual error.
Yeah. We fail because we try to paint the object itself.
Yeah.
We tell ourselves, well, the star is a gold object, therefore I must use gold paint.
Right. That makes logical sense to most of us.
It does, but true realism, especially the kind of realism that makes a completely flat canvas look like it's literally emitting light. It isn't about the object at all. It is entirely about the mechanics of how light behaves in a physical space.
Which is exactly what we are exploring in today's deep dive. We have this genuinely fascinating document in front of us detailing the artistic process of the master painter Rodolfo Im from GRUPO RAIIM.
A true master of his craft.
Oh, absolutely. And our mission today is to essentially step inside his visual logic. We want to figure out how he achieves what honestly feels impossible. Because he is painting a canvas filled with these highly reflective, metallic Christmas ornaments.
Yeah, really complex setup.
Totally. We're talking about a massive, faceted gold star, a slick red metallic sphere, one of those mirrored disco ball type spheres, and a very delicate gold flower. He creates his explosive, blinding metallic shine, and he does it, and this is the crazy part, without using a single drop of metallic paint.
Right, and the process documented here is just, it's a masterclass in visual psychology and optical physics.
It really is.
Rodolfo Im is proving that the magic doesn't come from, buying a special tube of shiny paint at the art store. It comes from deeply understanding the underlying architecture of light.
The architecture of light, I like that.
Yeah, and to understand how this master paints something as complex as metal, we have to start before the color even exists. You cannot build brilliant light without first building a profound, carefully engineered foundation of shadow.
Okay, let's unpack this, because looking through the notes on how Amai actually starts this canvas, I'm seeing a massive contradiction.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, he wants to end up with this blinding light, right? Yeah. But his very first move is laying down a base of Naples yellow. And looking at the specific mix he uses, so it's titanium white, yellow ochre, a touch of orange, and raw umber. It's muddy. It's a very muted earth tone. Starting a painting of brilliant light by covering the whole canvas in a dull, earthy yellow just seems completely counterintuitive. Why not just sketch out the ornaments and start painting the bright gold?
Because he is working within a classical logic that dates back to the Renaissance. It's a method utilized by Flemish masters like Jan van Eyck and later perfected by painters like Rubens and Rembrandt. He is building what's called a grisaille.
A grisaille, okay.
Right. In the logic of classical painting, you don't just, slap color onto empty space. That muted Naples yellow base layer we mentioned. That is not a background.
It's not.
No, it is the reserve of light for the entire masterpiece. It is the glowing, warm floor that every subsequent layer of paint will eventually stand on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and once that luminous base is established, Im begins to build the shadows using highly diluted layers of darker earth tones, specifically things like burnt sienna and raw umber.
So, wait, he's effectively ignoring the local color of the ornaments entirely at this stage. It's almost like he's sculpting in 2 dimensions.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
You're carving out the 3-dimensional volume of these spheres and stars, like finding their weight and their shape long before you even think about the actual clothes the objects are wearing, so to speak.
That is exactly the core artistic principle at play here. Light and shadow create the volume. Color simply dresses that volume.
Right.
If you do not have the heavy 3-dimensional mass established first, your bright colors are always going to look flat and lifeless. The master is slowly, meticulously modeling the roundness of the sphere and the sharp geometric facets of the star, using only those diluted earth tones over that Naples yellow base.
Thinking about it that way completely shifts how you view a finished painting. Like the blinding, explosive light that you, the viewer, see at the very end of a masterpiece. It wasn't just added as an afterthought at the end.
Not at all.
It was actually born in the very first, dullest layer of paint on the canvas.
Exactly. The light is quite literally built from the ground up. But having a three-dimensional shape isn't the end of the line. The next challenge she faces is transformational.
Right, because we have the 3D mass now, the shadows are carved out, but, a lump of wet clay has mass, and it certainly doesn't shine. So how do we cross that bridge from heavy and matte to luminous and metallic?
Well, this is where the true alchemy begins. And it relies entirely on optical information rather than just physical coverage.
Optical information.
Yeah. And it takes a warm white, which is just titanium white, with a tiny pinch of yellow ochre so it doesn't look chalky. And he began to apply it to the areas that will eventually catch the most light.
Okay.
But the critical detail in his process is the application itself. He doesn't paint this white on thickly at all. He applies it incredibly soft, highly diluted, transparent layers. And crucially, he lets the canvas dry completely between each and every layer.
Now, I have to push back on that a bit because that sounds completely maddening.
It takes patience, for sure.
I mean, if you know the top facet of that star needs to be bright white, my instinct, and I think most people's instinct, is to just grab a thick brush loaded with white paint and slap it exactly where I want it. Why on earth would you endure the agonizing wait times of letting microscopic transparent layers dry for days?
I get that.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating here is the physical mechanics of the medium itself. The master is not trying to just cover the canvas with pigment. He is orchestrating a literal optical event.
An optical event.
Yes.
Yeah.
These highly diluted transparent layers are called velladuras, or glazes. If you apply thick, opaque paint, you immediately kill the layer beneath it. You create a solid wall that just blocks the light entirely.
Oh, I see where this is going. It's like musical chords.
Okay, yeah.
Like if you just mash all the piano keys down at once with a really heavy hand, you just get noise, you get mud. But with these glazes, each transparent layer is like a distinct musical note that modifies the emotional resonance of the previous note without destroying it. You can still hear the history of the notes underneath.
That is a brilliant analogy, and the physics actually back that up perfectly. When you apply a velladura, a transparent glaze, you are essentially creating a microscopic window made out of oil, medium, and suspended pigment.
Wow.
So when you, the viewer, look at the finished painting in a museum, ambient light from the room you were standing in physically travels through those transparent layers of warm white.
It goes through the paint?
Exactly. It travels through, it hits that original Naples yellow base we talked about earlier, and then it bounces back through the transparent layers to hit your retina.
So the light is literally traveling into the painting, interacting with the foundation, and then bouncing back out again.
It is not just sitting on the surface. That physical journey of the light is what creates that magical, undeniable sense of depth. You aren't just looking at flat paint on a woven cloth. You are looking at trapped light bouncing back at you, carrying the chromatic richness of every single layer it just passed through.
Thinking about a canvas not as a flat image, but as a machine that traps and filters light, that is wild. Okay, so now the underlying light is set, the 3D volume is there, and the surface is perfectly dry. But it's still mostly just yellow and earth tones.
Right, it needs life.
Exactly. The ornaments need to acquire temperature. It's time to make them actually look like vibrant gold and deep red metal.
This is the stage where Im starts applying incredibly fine glazes of cadmium yellow to the gold star and the delicate gold flower.
Okay, so bringing in the heat.
Yeah, suddenly the object has heat, it has real vibrancy, the painting starts to feel joyful. But then, right when the image is achieving that intense warmth, he introduces something completely unexpected into the mix. He brings in Payne's gray.
Okay, looking through the documentation of his process, this is the exact moment where I would have panicked and just ruined the canvas.
Oh, totally. It's a scary move.
Right. For anyone listening who hasn't painted before, Payne's gray is not some subtle, gentle color. It is essentially this bottomless, cold, blue-black. And Im takes this near-black color, dilutes it into a transparent glaze, and applies it directly into the shadows of the ornaments and all over that mirrored disco ball sphere.
He does.
Aren't you risking just muddying the entire piece? Like, I would be terrified to touch a luminous, joyful yellow painting with a blue-black glaze. Why would you add near black to a painting that is supposed to be blindingly bright?
Because brightness does not exist in a vacuum.
Okay.
The master is tapping into the Baroque principle of chiaroscuro, which is an Italian term meaning light-dark. It was famously perfected by Caravaggio. Im understands a brutal truth about human perception. To make the light truly sing, the darkness surrounding it must be profound.
So he's intentionally pushing the shadows deeper just to make the bright spots look brighter by comparison.
It is far more than just a simple trick of contrast, actually.
Yeah.
It creates a literal spatial phenomenon on the two-dimensional canvas.
What do you mean?
Well, by deepening the shadows with that cold blue-black Payne's gray, the dark areas visually recede. To the human eye, they seem to physically push backward into the depth of the canvas. And because the shadows are aggressively retreating, the illuminated areas, those warm, layered whites and cadmium yellows, are forced to aggressively advance toward you.
That is unbelievable. So the brilliance of the metal isn't actually coming from the light paint at all. It's being carved out of the depths of the darkest shadows. The light is literally being propelled forward by the dark.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really changes how you understand every masterpiece you've ever seen. The greatest artists aren't just painting light. They're engineering darkness to serve the light.
The psychological manipulation there is just brilliant. Okay, so the extreme contrast gives the ornaments this intense volume, and the glazes give them vibrant color. But right now, if you just had a bright gold object and a bright red object, they could just be like very brightly lit plastic.
True.
What makes them look like actual highly polished metal sitting in a real room?
The transition from a bright object to highly polished metal is entirely about context. You see, a piece of plastic has a local color, but metal reflects its reality.
Reflects its reality.
Yeah, so Im introduces a light bluish-gray glaze. He applies it selectively to the ornaments and to the background. Following that, he begins to apply rich, deep red glazes to the red star and the large red sphere.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Going through his steps, he doesn't just put the red glaze on the red ornaments.
No, he does.
He takes that rich red and he paints a delicate, subtle red glow onto the side of the gold star that's sitting next to it. He paints it onto the silver-mirrored sphere. He's not just painting the object anymore, is he?
No. He is painting the room the object is sitting in.
Right, because if you paint a shiny gold star in a total vacuum, it just looks like an isolated sticker. It feels completely fake. But the second my brain sees the red sphere reflecting onto the gold facet of the star, it subconsciously says, oh, they're sitting on the same table. They are interacting. It anchors them.
The physics concept you were describing is called specular reflection. Polished metal does not just have a local color. It acts as an active mirror to its universe.
Wow.
That cold bluish-gray glaze he added earlier that simulates the ambient light of the room or maybe a cold sky spilling onto the metallic surfaces. The red reflections are the objects literally talking to each other through light.
It grounds the entire illusion in a shared physical universe. Like, a true master doesn't just paint an object. They paint the conversation that object is having with the world around it.
Beautifully said. And because of specular reflection, the viewer's brain recognizes the physics at play without even realizing it. We see those complex secondary reflections every single day in reality, bouncing off car bumpers or silverware.
Right. It's just everywhere.
So when I meticulously paint them into the canvas, our brain bypasses the fact that it's looking at oil paint and immediately concludes, well, that surface must be highly polished metal.
We are getting incredibly close to the final image now. The glazes have added rich, realistic color. They've established the ambient light, and they've grounded the objects together. But, there's a mechanical problem with building a painting this way, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
Applying layer after layer of transparent glazes naturally lowers the overall tonal contrast of the piece. The edges get a little softer, the darks aren't quite as sharp as they were, so the master has to make his final, decisive moves to restore that hard, explosive, metallic shine.
This is the crescendo of the entire process. Because the contrast is naturally softened from those veladuras, Im actually reapplies the Payne's gray.
He goes back in with the darks.
Yes, he goes back in to deepen the lost shadows in a highly measured millimeter by millimeter way. He forces the darks back down into the canvas, and then he brings in a completely new color. Vanadate yellow.
Vanadate yellow, yeah. The source notes highlight this specifically. It's a pigment that is even more luminous, with an even greater chromatic purity than the cadmium yellow he used to build the warmth earlier.
It is intensely vibrant. But he doesn't just put it everywhere. He selectively glazes this vanadate yellow only onto very specific gold elements, like the sharpest edge of the star or the absolute tip of the flower.
So it's highly targeted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He isn't covering the objects. He is creating a targeted chromatic vibration right where the warm light hits the hardest. He is elevating the temperature of the gold to its absolute visual peak.
And then comes the climax, the absolute final touch. tiny microscopic dots of pure titanium white.
Yes.
He places them at the exact focal points of the ornaments. The source material calls these the altas luces, the maximum highlights.
Those tiny dots are the culmination of everything we've discussed today.
Yeah.
All the transparent layers, the agonizing drying times, the spatial manipulation of the Payne's gray, the glowing Naples yellow base, it all leads to this.
What does this all mean? Looking at the way those tiny white dots completely transform the painting, it really reminds me of a cymbal crash at the end of a symphony.
Oh, that's a great way to think about it.
Right, because if you just walk up to a drum kit and hit a cymbal, it's just a loud, annoying noise. But if you place that exact same cymbal crash at the exact right millisecond after an hour of tense, emotional, orchestral buildup, it is completely shattering.
Exactly. If you took a blank canvas and painted a white dot on it, it would just be a white dot of dried pigment. But Rodolfo Im has spent hours meticulously building deep, receding shadows with Payne's gray. He has established warm, glowing midtones with Naples yellow.
Yeah.
He has created a shared, credible physical space with transparent red and blue optical filters. Because he built that vast architecture first, when he finally places that single dot of pure titanium white, your brain has no choice.
The brain is completely trapped by the illusion. It can't see paint anymore.
The viewer's brain interprets that single dot of white paint not as a physical material, but as a blinding natural reflection of a light source hitting a solid, polished, metallic surface.
He has taken dull earth tones, crushed minerals, oil medium, and a whole lot of waiting time, and he has essentially forged blindingly shiny metal out of it.
And that really brings us to the core revelation of this entire deep dive. What Rodolfo improves with this process, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that the true magic of realism does not come from the tube of paint. You cannot buy shiny at the art store.
You really can't.
The magic comes from a profound, almost scientific understanding of how the human eye perceives light, temperature, and contrast.
You know, if you've been listening to this, you haven't just learned how one specific painting of Christmas ornaments was made today. You've learned how visual perception actually works. I guarantee you will never look at a painting in a museum, a shiny coffee mug on your desk, or even a simple sunset the same way again.
No, you'll see it completely differently.
Next time you see a painted metal object, or honestly, any masterpiece, you won't just passively look at the image. You're going to look closer. You're going to look for the hidden blues of the ambient light, the reflected reds anchoring the objects to reality, and the deep receding Payne's gray pushing the light forward right into your eyes.
You'll see the invisible architecture beneath the image. Which, raises an important question, doesn't it? A much broader implication about how we view the world in general.
It definitely does. It leaves us with something pretty wild to ponder. Think about it. If our sophisticated human eyes and our incredibly complex brains can be so completely and utterly tricked into seeing solid, glowing, reflective gold just by a master strategically layering some transparent, muddy earth pigments on a flat piece of cloth.
It makes you wonder about the nature of perception itself.
It really does. It makes you wonder how much of our everyday reality is just a similar optical illusion, waiting for us to look a little closer, peel back the glazes, and see the underlying layers. Remember that flat, dull orange blob you tried to paint in your head at the beginning of this deep dive? It turns out the only difference between that heavy blob and a blinding light is knowing how to orchestrate the shadows.